For more than 2 centuries, the United States has been shaped by legends, some celebrated, others whispered only in dimly lit archives. Yet among the countless untold stories, one stands unlike any other. A tale so astonishing, so deeply rooted in real historical events that its pieces remain scattered across private letters, forgotten military records, and the personal journals of a man who never intended to be a hero. This is the story of Elias Turner, a name you were never taught in school, but one that quietly altered the course of American history. On an icy December morning in 1811, in a small frontier settlement along the edge of the Indiana Territory, 12-year-old Elias Turner woke to the distant thunder of hooves. The Turner family cabin stood near the dense forest bordering the Wabash River, a region caught between expanding American settlements and the rising resistance of native confederacies under Tecumseh and his brother Tenskwatawa, the prophet. Most children in the settlement feared the brewing conflict. Elias, however, had grown up with a fascination for the wilderness and the stories it held. His mother, Margaret Turner, had been a schoolteacher back east before frontier life hardened her hands and her voice. She filled Elias's mind with tales of ancient civilizations, lost explorers, and scientific wonders. His father, Jacob Turner, a former surveyor for the U.S. Army, taught him how to read land, how to follow the slope of the earth, how rivers carved history as surely as kings. But on this morning, the world felt different. The hoofbeats were urgent. Jacob was already at the window, musket in hand. "Riders from Vincennes," he muttered. "Something's happened." When he stepped outside, Elias followed at a distance, heart pounding. A pair of exhausted scouts delivered the news. General William Henry Harrison had clashed with the prophet's forces at the Battle of Tippecanoe. There were casualties, many, and rumors that the native warriors had fought with an almost supernatural ferocity. Jacob listened silently. Margaret clutched Elias's shoulders. But even as fear rippled through the settlement, Elias sensed something deeper, something strange. For the past month, he had been noticing signs, animal tracks that didn't match any local species, trees marked with symbols he didn't recognize, and, on 2 occasions, a faint humming sound from the forest at night, like distant metal grinding. He tried telling his father, but Jacob dismissed it as imagination. Now, listening to the scouts, Elias realized the truth. Whatever was happening in the forest was connected to the rising conflict. He could feel it. And soon, he would discover that the reason he noticed things others didn't was because he possessed something rare, an extraordinary memory and the ability to recall exact details of anything he saw or heard. A gift Jacob feared and Margaret tried to nurture. A gift that powerful men would kill to control. 3 days after the messengers arrived, Elias slipped into his father's workspace, a small shed built from rough logs where Jacob kept survey equipment and stacks of maps. He wasn't supposed to be there, but curiosity tugged him like a magnet. He rummaged carefully, fingertips gliding over rolled parchments. Then he froze. At the bottom of a crate lay a map unlike the others, older, edges brittle, ink faded. It depicted the Indiana Territory, but not as Elias had ever seen it. Hidden trails, unmarked structures, symbols burned into the parchment, and one location circled in dark ink, Deepwater Hollow, only a few miles from their home. Before he could examine further, a voice whispered behind him. "You weren't supposed to see that." Elias spun around. His father stood in the doorway, pale. Jacob took the map gently, almost reverently. "This isn't just a drawing. It's evidence of something the government buried long before you were born." "What is it?" Elias asked. Jacob hesitated. "A discovery. One that shouldn't exist in this part of the world."
But before he could say more, the door burst open. A stranger in military uniform stepped inside, an officer Elias had never seen before. His insignia bore the mark of the U.S. Army, but with a strange additional emblem, an eagle clutching an eye. "Jacob Turner," the man said coldly, "you have something that belongs to the United States government." Elias's life would never be the same again. The officer introduced himself as Captain Silas Graydon of the Continental Intelligence Corps, a shadow division within the early U.S. government responsible for containing anomalous discoveries across frontier lands. Artifacts, structures, technologies, things that defied known history. Graydon accused Jacob of hiding a classified object found during a surveying mission months earlier. Jacob refused to surrender it. Graydon ordered his men to seize the map and search the premises. Margaret fought. Jacob resisted. The Turners were outnumbered. Amid the chaos, Elias slipped out a back window and into the forest, but not before grabbing something from his father's work table, a small leather-bound journal. Jacob's handwriting filled the pages with sketches of strange geometric carvings found deep in the woods. Elias knew he had to run. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would return. This was his family's secret now, and he would uncover the truth, even if it meant facing the same hidden forces that shaped America's earliest days. Elias moved through the forest with the quiet precision his father had taught him. The sun dipped below the horizon, turning the bare trees into jagged silhouettes. Every sound, every snap of a twig, every rustle in the dying underbrush seemed to echo with danger. Behind him, distant shouts carried on the wind as Captain Graydon's men scoured the settlement. He clutched the leather-bound journal tight. It felt heavier now, as if the inked pages carried the weight of an entire lost history. Jacob Turner had written frantically in the final entries, sketching angular shapes carved into stone, shapes that did not belong to any known native tribe or European explorer. Symbols so clean, so mathematically precise, they almost hummed with meaning. Elias had seen some of them himself. That was his secret. And now the government wanted whatever his father had found. Hours later, after pushing through thickets and crossing half-frozen streams, Elias reached the entrance to Deepwater Hollow. Locals whispered about it, said the animals avoided it, that compasses spun uselessly near its depths, and that hunters who ventured there returned speaking of strange lights. Elias stepped inside. Immediately the world changed. A subtle vibration pulsed through the ground. The trees grew in perfect alignment. Too perfect. The air smelled metallic. And ahead, in the clearing, he saw it. A stone structure half buried in earth, rectangular and smooth like a carved monolith. Its surface shimmered faintly, as though absorbing moonlight. Elias approached slowly, heart thundering. He reached out and placed his hand on the stone. A low hum rippled beneath his fingers. Then, light. A faint line of symbols illuminated across the surface, glowing blue. Elias stumbled back. He had seen those same symbols in his father's journal.
For more than 2 centuries, the United States has been shaped by legends, some celebrated, others whispered only in dimly lit archives. Yet among the countless untold stories, one stands unlike any other, a tale so astonishing, so deeply rooted in real historical events, that its pieces remain scattered across private letters, forgotten military records, and the personal journals of a man who never intended to be a hero. This is the story of Elias Turner, a name you were never taught in school, but one that quietly altered the course of American history. On an icy December morning in 1811, in a small frontier settlement along the edge of the Indiana Territory, 12-year-old Elias Turner woke to the distant thunder of hooves. The Turner family cabin stood near the dense forest bordering the Wabash River,
a region caught between expanding American settlements and the rising resistance of native confederacies under Tecumseh and his brother Tenskwatawa, the prophet. Most children in the settlement feared the brewing conflict. Elias, however, had grown up with a fascination for the wilderness and the stories it held. His mother, Margaret Turner, had been a school teacher back east before frontier life hardened her hands and her voice. She filled Elias's mind with tales of ancient civilizations, lost explorers, and scientific wonders. His father, Jacob Turner, a former surveyor for the U.S. Army, taught him how to read land, how to follow the slope of the earth, how rivers carved history as surely as kings. But on this morning, the world felt different. The hoofbeats were urgent. Jacob was already at the window, musket in hand.
Elias didn't stop running until the humming faded into the distance. He collapsed beside a cluster of boulders, lungs burning. When he finally caught his breath, he pulled out Jacob's journal and flipped to the last written page. There, in his father's rushed handwriting, were the words, "If something awakens within the hollow, do not approach." They called it a signal engine, built by hands lost to time. It influences the mind. Elias swallowed hard. He turned the page. His father had drawn a map, one that extended far beyond Deepwater Hollow. Symbols placed across the continent, locations marked in areas that would one day become major U.S. cities: New York, Washington, Charleston, St. Louis. It wasn't random. These sites formed a pattern, a network, and Deepwater Hollow was only one piece. Elias stared at the journal, realization crashing over him. His father hadn't just found something unusual. The first pale stroke of morning slipped over the eastern ridge as the camp stirred with uneasy silence. Smoke nestled low in the valley, drifting like a warning no one yet dared to voice. Only the slow clang of armor and the rustle of canvas broke the hush. Commander Eric emerged from his tent, fastening the last clasp of his breastplate. The metal was cold against his skin. Colder, he thought, than the realization that today would decide the fate of his people. He glanced toward the river where the mist danced, obscuring the opposite shore. Somewhere beyond it, the enemy massed. At the heart of camp, Mira knelt beside a dwindling flame. Her fingers traced symbols in the ash, ancient runes her mother had taught her long before the kingdom fractured. As the embers glowed under her touch, she whispered, "The spirits are restless." Eric approached. "Your visions again?" She replied, "They aren't visions. The land itself is trembling. A fire rises in the east, one we cannot outrun." Eric frowned. "What kind of fire?" Mira hesitated. "A fire with a human face." Before he could press her further, a horn shattered the morning calm. A scout galloped into camp, mud streaked across his cloak. "Commander! Riders on the ridge to the north, flying the Black Standard!" The Black Standard. Eric's jaw tightened. Only one man rode beneath that sigil, Lord Elias, the warlord whose armies burned villages to cinders and whose ambition had ignited this war. Eric signaled his captains, "Form the lines, hold the eastern bank, we meet them at dawn." But Mira's hand caught his wrist. "No," she whispered urgently, "that's what Elias expects. His real strike comes from the river." As if summoned by her words, a sudden roar echoed across the valley. The river's mist tore open, and from it burst dark-clad soldiers, their boots churning the water, torches flaring like hungry serpents in the gloom. "To arms!" Eric shouted. Chaos erupted. Arrows streaked through the air, shields clashed, horses screamed. Flames leapt from thrown torches, catching the tents like dry wheat. Within moments, the camp blazed with a furious heat. Mira seized Eric's arm. "You must survive this morning," she said. "There is more at stake than your kingdom." "My people die today. I'm not running." "You're not running," she insisted. "You're leading." With a sweep of her hand, she summoned a gust of wind that snuffed a torch's flames before they reached a wounded soldier. Eric widened his eyes. "Mira, your powers!"
"There will be time for answers later," she snapped. "For now, trust me." Together, they plunged into the fray. Eric's sword met Kaelus's vanguard with a clash that echoed through the burning valley. Mira moved beside him, her voice rising in ancient chants, bending the very air to shield their retreating troops. For a moment, only a brief, suspended moment, it seemed they might hold the line. But then the ground trembled. From the ridge beyond the river emerged a towering war machine, a massive wooden engine crowned with iron teeth dragged by dozens of soldiers. A siege burner designed to swallow entire battalions in flame. Eric's breath caught. He means to burn us alive. Mira's eyes glowed with gathering power. Its fire is unnatural, bound by chains I cannot see. Eric understood. Magic, woven into the very bones of the machine. Kaelus's signature. Behind them, the camp was collapsing. Soldiers fell back from burning tents, horses broke their tethers and bolted, and the riverbank, meant to be their defense, now served as a trap filled with smoke and flame. Eric's captains shouted orders, trying desperately to reorganize, but panic was the stronger force. "Commander!" Captain Darren sprinted toward him, face streaked with soot. "Our left flank is gone if we don't pull back." Eric cut him off. "We hold the center. If the line breaks, Kaelus marches straight to the capital." Darren swallowed hard. "Then we die here." "Not today." He turned to Mira. "Can you stop it?" She closed her eyes. The wind around her shivered. "I can slow it, but breaking the spell that powers it, I would need to get inside." Eric stared at her. "Inside? That thing will roast you alive." Mira stepped forward anyway, the flames flickering as if recoiling from her presence. "There are truths I haven't told you. I was raised among the Orathi order. We study fire, not to wield it, but to unmake it." Eric blanked. "That order hasn't existed for generations." "Only because the kingdom stopped looking for us." She met his eyes, urgency in her voice. "You must trust me." A horn blared across the river, deep, triumphant. Lord Kaelus's silhouette appeared on the ridge, mounted on a black steed, watching his machine advance with cold satisfaction. Eric's grip tightened. "Then I'll get you to the siege burner." He didn't hesitate. With a rallying cry, he charged toward the advancing machine. His surviving soldiers, seeing their commander move, rallied behind him with renewed strength. Shields locked, they forced their way through the chaos, cutting a path through Kaelus's front line. The heat grew unbearable. Eric felt the air sear his throat, the metal of his armor scorching his skin even through the padding. But he pushed on. "Faster!" Mira urged, her voice strained. She was holding the flames back with every ounce of her power. The wind spiraled violently around her, carrying sparks skyward like fireflies. An enemy squad broke through, rushing toward them. Eric stepped in front of Mira, blade flashing. Steel rang, blood spilled. His arms burned with the effort, but he held the line as Mira continued her chant. At last, they reached the siege burner. Up close, the machine was monstrous, iron plates hammered together, chains rattling, fire spitting through the gaps like a caged beast. A hatch on its side clanged open. Mira's eyes widened. "They're letting the fire out!" A blast of scorched air hurled Eric backward. He hit the ground hard, stars exploding in his vision. Through the haze he saw Mira, standing before the open hatch, her hair whipping in the heat and her voice rising in a powerful incantation. The flames recoiled as if pushed by an invisible force. The chains binding the fire spirit glowed, then cracked. Kaelus shouted from the ridge. Even at a distance, Eric saw the fury twist his face. Mira's chant reached its peak. A sound like cracking ice split the air. And then the siege burner screamed. Not metal, something inside it. The machine buckled. The furnace roared that imploded in white-hot light. Eric shielded his face as heat slammed over him. When the fire cleared, Mira was on her knees before the shattered machine, smoke curling from her fingertips. Eric ran to her. "Mira!" She looked up. Her voice was barely a whisper. "The fire is free, but so is he." "He?" Eric echoed. Mira pointed toward the ridge. Kaelis had dismounted, his cloak burned away, revealing charred runes etched across his arms, sigils of forbidden magic. "The warlord bound the fire spirit," she said weakly, "and now that I've broken the chains, he will try to claim it himself." The valley turned eerily still. Above Kaelis, the scattered embers of the siege burner gathered into a swirling inferno. A new fire was rising. The inferno above the ridge twisted like a living storm, drawing sparks from the air and heat from the burning camp below. Eric shielded his eyes as the blaze rose higher, gathering into a single searing core, shifting, stretching, taking shape. Mira staggered to her feet, gripping Eric's arm for balance. She murmured, "It's choosing a form, a fire spirit freed after generations. It will manifest according to the will of the strongest mind near it." Eric's gaze shot to Kaelis. The warlord stood unmoving amid the swirling fire, runes pulsing in rhythm with the spirit's awakening. He raised both hands, chanting, calling the fire to him like a king summoning loyal subjects. Mira's grip tightened. "If he binds it now, Eric, there won't be a kingdom left to defend." The fire spiraled down toward Kaelis. Eric didn't wait for a plan. He sprinted up the rocky slope, lungs burning, sword dragging sparks as it struck stone. Soldiers watched him go, disbelief etched on their soot-streaked faces, but none could follow.
Kaelis rose, enraged, his power draining but not extinguished. "You cannot defeat me!" Eric lifted his blade. "Maybe not, but you won't claim that spirit." The fire spirit turned its shifting face toward Eric and Mira. "One of you freed me," it said, voice rumbling like cracking stone. "One of you tried to bind me." Its flames brightened. "Only one shall I heed." Eric felt the heat intensify, his skin blistering. Mira stepped forward, trembling but unafraid. "Great Spirit," she called, "I freed you because your chains were wrong, but the world you awaken to is fragile. If you unleash your full wrath, innocence will burn." The spirit stared at her, then at Kaelis, then at the burning valley. The flames dimmed, slightly, a sign of listening. Kaelis roared and hurled a desperate blast of fire toward them, and the spirit intercepted it, absorbing the flame into its chest. Kaelis froze. The spirit lowered its blazing head. "The chains are broken. Now I choose." The fire shifted, coiling like a serpent preparing to strike. Eric raised his sword again. Mira whispered, "This will decide the fate of the war." The fire spirit towered above them, a shifting colossus of molten light and ancient fury. Embers whirled around its form like comets caught in orbit, scorching the ground wherever they landed. Mira felt the heat claw at her skin, yet she stepped forward without flinching. Eric moved beside her, sword lifted, though trembling. He could feel the weight of the moment. Every soldier in the valley could. The battle had paused, as if the world itself held its breath. Kaelis stood opposite them, face carved by rage and disbelief, runes still faintly glowing but losing their once dominant shine. His armor dripped molten streaks where Eric's blow had cracked it. The spirit's voice rolled across the ridge. "I choose the one who carries fire without wanting to keep it." Mira's breath caught. Eric stared at her. Kaelis's snarl widened into a murderous grin. But the spirit wasn't finished. "And I judge the one who carries fire
only to rule with it. Kalis stiffened. You dare judge me? I awakened you. You stole my breath and caged me in iron. The flames around the being surged, spiraling toward Kalis like a living storm. Kalis lifted his arms. No! You belong to me! The spirit answered with a roar that shattered rock. A torrent of fire slammed into Kalis, engulfing him in blinding light. Eric threw himself in front of Mira, shielding her from the searing heat. Wind burst from her fingertips, forming a barrier of swirling ash that kept them alive as the ridge cracked and the air screamed from the intensity. When at last the flames receded, a silence like grave snow settled. Kalis lay at the edge of the ridge, armor fused to his skin, the runes darkened to ash. He was alive, barely, but broken, his fire spent. Eric approached cautiously. Kalis's eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain and disbelief. You have ruined everything, he rasped. Eric shook his head. You ruined yourself. Kalis tried to raise a hand, but even that effort sent a tremor through him. The kingdom will fall without a ruler strong enough to command fear. You are too weak to stop what comes. Mira stepped beside Eric. Fear is not strength, Kalis. It is only hunger wearing armor. Kalis coughed, a dry, brittle sound. You think the fire spirit is your ally? His lips twisted into a faint, terrible smile. You have no idea what you've freed. Before either could respond, the spirit descended again, its form swirling and melting into something smaller, more human in shape, though still shifting with deep red flame. You speak truth, mortal, it said. I am no ally to any kingdom. Eric tightened his grip on his sword. Then what do you want? The spirit tilted what passed for its head. To return to the world that made me. Mira frowned. The realm beneath. The spirit's light pulsed, agreement. But the breach is sealed. The stone gate was buried centuries ago. Yet I feel the cracks. I need only one who can open them. Its burning gaze fixed on Mira. Eric stepped in front of her. No, she nearly died freeing you. And for that, the spirit said, voice softening into something almost reverent, she carries my favor. Only she may guide me home. Mira's heart pounded. The realm beneath, the ancient mythic world of primal elements, was said to be unreachable by mortals. To open a gate would require power far beyond her training. I can't, she whispered. I'm not strong enough. Not alone, the spirit answered. It extended a hand made of flickering flame. But with my fire, you can be. Eric grabbed her arm. Mira, no, we don't know what that means. She looked into his eyes. Eric, if we refuse, the spirit won't vanish. It will seek another way, another vessel. The destruction could be worse than anything Kalis had planned. Eric opened his mouth to protest, but the spirit's heat pressed against them like a heartbeat. Kalis, barely conscious, let out a ragged laugh. Go on then, take the fire, become the thing you fear. Mira ignored him. Slowly, trembling, she stepped toward the spirit. Will I survive this? She asked. Yes, if your purpose is true. Mira took a breath that tasted of smoke and destiny. Eric reached out, catching her hand for one final moment. Whatever happens, I'll follow you. She squeezed back. I know. Then she placed her palm against the spirit's fiery hand. Light erupted, brilliant, blinding, pure. Wind howled through the valley, fire spiraled into Mira's body, dancing through her veins like living warmth. She cried out, not in pain, but in overwhelming depth, as if she felt every ember in the world awakening at once. Eric fell to one knee, shielding his face. The fire quieted. Mira stood at the center of the ridge, unburned, unharmed, but transformed. Her eyes glowed like twin sparks. Flames traced delicate lines along her arms, not consuming her, but marking her as something new. Not human alone, not spirit alone, something between. The spirit's vast form had vanished, absorbed, dormant within her. Eric rose slowly. Mira, are you still you? She turned to him, and her voice was soft but resonant, layered with an echo that hadn't been there before. I am, she said, but the path ahead is no longer mine alone. She looked south, toward the distant capital. The gate must be opened, and when it does, everything will change. Eric stepped beside her, steadying his breath. Then we face it together. Mira nodded. Behind them the valley stirred as the remaining soldiers watched their commander and the newly awakened fire-bearer. Ahead of them lay the realm beneath, the broken kingdom, and a world on the brink of transformation. The valley smoldered long into the afternoon, pillars of smoke rising like mournful banners over the battlefield. Soldiers moved among the wreckage in a daze, tending to the wounded, gathering fallen comrades, extinguishing the last pockets of fire. Word of the spirit's awakening had already spread, whispered as both a miracle and a warning. Eric stood at the ridge's edge, surveying what remained of his army. Though bruised and bloodied, they were alive, more than he had dared to hope when dawn first broke. The defeat that seemed certain hours earlier had become something stranger, a victory forged by forces few understood. Behind him, Mira gazed down at her hands, holding them as though they belonged to someone else. Even when she lowered them, the faint glow along her arms shimmered beneath her skin, flickering in rhythm with her breath. The spirit's presence within her